Okay, let's move on to Ignatius of Antioch from the early 2nd century. Marcus Grodi makes the tired old argument that Ignatius used very special, deferential language reserved only for Rome, and addressed the Roman congregation in very reverent terms that he did not use when he addressed other congregations. Here is Marcus Grodi making the case.
Let's go to St. Ignatius of Antioch again. He's writing in 110 AD, letter to the Romans. He wrote a lot of letters to churches on his way to Rome, but when he wrote the letter to Rome itself, listen to how he addresses that church. He's the bishop of Antioch, and he writes, Ignatius, to the church also which holds the presidency in the place of the country of the Romans, worthy of God, worthy of honor, worthy of blessing, worthy of praise, worthy of success, worthy of sanctification. And because you hold the presidency in love, named after Christ and named after the Father. The bishop of Antioch, traveling from the Middle East towards his martyrdom in Rome, he addresses the church in Rome as the church that's the presidency, the church that's of great significance amongst the other churches.
Wow, the congregation at Rome holds the presidency in love. Really? Well, pack your bags and bring your swimming trunks, boys, because we're swimming the Tiber tonight. Oh, goodness gracious, what are we to do with poor Marcus Grodi? He must think we haven't read Ignatius's letters. Or, what is more likely, perhaps Mr. Grodi has not read Ignatius's letters. If we read every other letter by Ignatius, the same way Mr. Grodi has read the letter to Rome, we'd have to readjust the ante-Nicene episcopal hierarchy with each letter. Every ante-Nicene church would have a claim of episcopal primacy. What, for example, are we to infer from Ignatius's use of the word Sanhedrin to describe the authority of the presbyters at the church at Tralles? The Sanhedrin was the highest judicial body and council of elders in ancient Jerusalem, and yet Ignatius refers to the Trallian presbyters alone as the Sanhedrin of God. The Sanhedrin of God, people! Now citing from Ignatius to the Trallians, chapter 3. In like manner, let all reverence the deacons as an appointment of Jesus Christ, and the bishop as Jesus Christ, who is the Son of the Father, and the presbyters as the Sanhedrin of God, and assembly of the apostles. Apart from these, there is no church. Again, Ignatius of Antioch to the Trallians, chapter 3. Wow! Apart from the leaders of Tralles, the very Sanhedrin of God, the very assembly of the apostles, there is no church? Maybe Tralles was to be that strong central episcopate that emerged early in the church to guide the sheep into all truth. Their presbyters were as the Sanhedrin and the assembly of the apostles. There can be no higher ecclesiastical authority on earth than the Sanhedrin of God. All hail Tralles, the strong central episcopate of the universal church, where Christ built his church upon Peter. Or what are we to infer from the fact that in Ignatius's 6 letters to the churches, he salutes every church except Ephesus? He salutes Magnesia in the greeting and in chapter 15, and he salutes Tralles in the greeting and in chapters 12 and 13, and he salutes Rome in the greeting and in chapter 9, and he salutes Philadelphia in the greeting and in chapter 11, and he salutes Smyrna in chapters 11 and 12. But in his letter to the church at Ephesus, he extends no formal salutation, and instead calls Ephesus predestinated before the ages of time, that it should be always for an enduring and unchangeable glory. That's from the greeting of Ignatius of Antioch's letter to the Ephesians. No other congregation in Ignatius's letters is addressed in this way. Maybe Ephesus was to be that strong central episcopate that emerged early in the church to guide the sheep into all truth. To such a church as this, no salutation is necessary, none is warranted. The salutation of the whole Christian church is already implied by its very existence. All hail to Ephesus, the strong central episcopate of the universal church. Honestly, what else could such a greeting possibly mean? That he should call them predestinated before the ages of time, and not insult them with such a common salutation. Or what are we to infer from Ignatius's selective description of how established each church was? He says the church of Ephesus is established in safety. That's chapter 12. He says the church in Smyrna is established in love. That's chapter 1. But for the church in Philadelphia, Ignatius reserves the highest honor. It is doubly established in harmony and in security. as he indicates in his greeting to that church. But Magnesia, on the other hand, is not yet established and must still study to be established. That's from chapter 13. What is worse, neither the Church of Rome nor the Church of Tralles are established at all. At least he does not use that word to describe them in his letters to them. What else can this possibly mean but that Philadelphia was doubly established in his primacy over all the churches? Small wonder, therefore, that Ignatius believed himself to be greatly enlarged in loving the Philadelphians. That's from his letter to the Philadelphians, chapter 5. An epithet assigned to no other church in any of his letters. Maybe Philadelphia was that strong central episcopate that emerged early in the church to guide the sheep into all truth. This is surely confirmed by the fact that Philadelphia alone is excluded from Ignatius's prayers for an abundance of happiness. He wishes an abundance of happiness for Ephesus and Magnesia, Tralles, Rome, Smyrna, and Polycarp in his respective greetings to each, but he withholds such a wish for Philadelphia. Surely this is because he knows that the bishop there had already achieved the perfection of happiness and was already an example of infinite meekness, as he states in his letter to the Philadelphians, chapter 1. This can hardly speak of anything else but the emergence of a Philadelphian primacy that would be so necessary to shepherd the fledgling church into all truth. All hail to Philadelphia, the strong central episcopate of the universal church. Now, we jest, of course. I hope that our facetious display has demonstrated just how desperate the Roman apologist is to find evidence of Roman primacy in the early church. Our point is simply that if someone looks long enough and hard enough, he will find something Ignatius describes to one church and to no other. And in that uniqueness, he will find what he is looking for. The only primacy the Roman apologist can find in Ignatius is the Roman primacy the apologist carried with him into the text. But we know better. A plain reading of Ignatius has him as just one bishop among many, writing to the various congregations to encourage them and to ask them to encourage him. That's it. But there is one more thing that we want to mention about this. Marcus Grodi has attempted to show that Ignatius deferred reverentially and submissively to the Bishop of Rome, but that is just wishful thinking, as we have shown. In fact, Ignatius did not believe the Bishop of Rome was the chief shepherd of all the churches. He believed the chief shepherd of each congregation was Christ himself. For example, when he wrote to the congregation at Rome, he acknowledged that he had left the congregation of Antioch without a bishop, and therefore that God himself and Jesus Christ would have to be their shepherd. He wrote, "Remember in your prayers the church in Syria, which now has God for its shepherd, instead of me. Jesus Christ alone will oversee it." That's Ignatius of Antioch to the Romans, paragraph 9. And then when he wrote to Polycarp, he said that the church at Smyrna has Polycarp for a bishop, but Polycarp has his own bishop, God himself, or Jesus Christ himself. Polycarp, bishop of the church of the Smyrnaeans, or rather, who has as his own bishop God the Father and the Lord Jesus Christ. That's from the greeting of Ignatius's letter to Polycarp. In other words, Ignatius did not believe that the Bishop of Rome was the bishop of bishops. Smyrna's bishop has God for a bishop. In his own absence, the church at Antioch has God for a bishop. That is, Ignatius thought God was the bishop of bishops. There was no sense in which he thought that the Bishop of Rome occupied that role. So not only do we not find in Ignatius a unique reverential, deferential tone reserved only for the Bishop of Rome, we also find that when Ignatius does explicitly refer to the bishop over the other bishops, it is Jesus Christ, who is the bishop over the bishops, not the Bishop of Rome. Remember that. We'll be coming back to it later in this episode.